folks, and welcome to the Fergy Sessions Podcast. I'm your host Daniel, and this week we are discussing a very important topic. We're discussing mental health, the importance of it in the UK. Now, mental health is a very important topic to all of us. I think we all have had some issues with mental health. We all have mental health in our own ways. And in order for me to do this podcast, I've got two very important guests who have had some experience with mental health. Others have dealt with people who have had mental health as well. I'm here with Rhian and I'm here with Robert. Guys, thank you for coming on to the podcast. Now, Rhian, I want to talk to you first. Obviously, you've had some students that talk to you about mental health in the past. What is that like? What's students' experience with mental health compared to what's it like when they discuss it with you?
I think primarily when students come to see me, it's my role to make sure they feel comfortable enough to talk about their issues. So possibly in the past they might have not felt that they were listened to or that they were heard. So, I might not talk about their mental health for like 4 or 5 sessions until they feel comfortable to talk about those things with me.
Do they usually feel comfortable when they talk to you?
The majority, yeah. I can't speak for everybody, but I think if they didn't feel comfortable, they wouldn't tell me their issues.
How many students? How many students have you had conversations with about the mental health? How many students have come to you?
Since September, I've had about. So if we say interactions, so the amount of times I've seen students, it might be the same student that I see a lot of times. But since September, I've had about 215 interactions with students.
Oh my.
Yeah.
So, moving away from experiences, what are the causes to mental health? Because obviously we know that depression and anxiety are two of the biggest causes of mental health. They could probably lead to bigger catastrophic things. Yeah. What are the other causes to mental health?
Well, I think the cause of mental health is unique to everybody. Yeah. So something might affect one person really badly, but another person might deal with it fine, and it wouldn't affect them. Yes, we have depression, we have anxiety, and these are things that people talk about and are quite open about these days. We also have eating disorders. We have psychosis. And they're a little bit more taboo. People aren't happy really to talk about their sort of psychosis because it can be quite scary.
It can.
Yeah.
So I'm going to move on to Robert now, because Robert's a student that's had mental health in the past before. He's also had friends that have dealt with mental health, but have had it's led to more catastrophic things. For example, suicide. For example, Robert, I want to come to you because. We've discussed this many times. You've gone through mental health. You've had students that have gone through mental health that, have led to more catastrophic and troubling things. Is it an important topic to talk about within the younger generation? Because, as we know, in the UK, there's men under the age of 45 that can, lead to suicide. Is it important to discuss it with the younger generation?
It is important because, with the younger generation, depending on how they, grow up. I'm always better at this. With how they grow up, such as, I don't mean to go into this topic again, but it's like how I've grown up. The one that affects me the most is, I don't know how many other people with it, which is abandonment, which most people, when they're in their older years, I'll say, or young years, experience something similar. So a loss of a family member or friend or something like that.
Yeah. Okay. This question is for you. It can also be for you, Rhian, if you want. Oops, sunglasses have fallen off. As a blender there. This question can be for both of you if you want. Obviously, mental health is preventable in some ways. There could be some students that can get better treatment for mental health. Others can unfortunately lead to disastrous things, which is which is horrible, it's awful, it's sad. What's helped some students prevent mental health? What's helped you prevent mental health in some way?
The way how I usually prevent my friend from ever I'll say, exceeding a certain amount with his own mental health is around the time when he's starting to feel down, get a bit sad. Then I'll make sure I'll go. I don't care that his house is like 8 miles from mine, windy, raining, whatever. He appreciates the fact that I'll go visit him, check on how he's doing, and make sure he's all right. Even though his mental health is just a nightmare, because you would have people that would make fun of him for not having a dad. Then you'd make fun of how people would make fun of how bad his family is. Then they'll start talking to him about how great their father is. To my friend, he lost his dad when he was very little, so he barely knew him, and yet people around him make fun of his dad all the time, which has led my friend to try to commit suicide multiple times. At one point, in the centre of Raf, he was going to stab himself with a knife. Put my sleeve over my hand, grab the knife blade, and do that, just so I could get the knife away from him. Then someone else came out to help to get the knife off him, and then he just ran running down the road and eventually started cutting himself with glass.
It's awful. It's completely awful to hear that, and it can happen towards people that have mental health. They can go like all the way, which is completely awful. Rhian, you, like I've said before, you've had students come to you with mental health. How have you dealt with these situations? Like, have there been like any parts where you've discussed mental health with students and then found a way to deal with it?
I think I would like to think that the majority of students that trust me with that information, that when the session is over, that they feel more positive about things. Obviously, as you were explaining, sometimes there's crisis, and we then have to intervene and we have to get external agencies involved and things like this. Sometimes we can calm the situation, and that person needs to feel believed. A lot of people could say, oh, they're attention seeking, or they're just doing it for effect, or these kind of things.
That can be like one of the really problems. But it's like Robin Williams once said, everyone is fighting a battle, you just don't know about it.
Absolutely.
So you just have to be nice to everyone.
Yeah, that's right. And it's so unnecessary, but it's not my job to judge anybody. No matter how many times they come and see me and tell me the same thing, it's not my job to judge them. So I just want to make them feel that they are believed by somebody. Well, not necessarily believed, but being heard. Because that's a huge thing, because then they start to have a little bit more confidence in themselves and feel then more able to seek the support that they need.
Okay. I want to go to the research bit right now, because I've done a lot of research before we went into the podcast. I've got some very useful websites here, like Mind. Mind is one of the number one leading mental health charities in the world. They've helped thousands among people in the UK, through Wales and England, that dealt with mental health. I've just gone through the facts and statistics. I want you to have a look at this for a minute. See, these are stats in both England and Wales, for anyone that's wondering. 1 in 4 people will actually experience mental health problems, some kind of each year in England. So basically, if you count that in a classroom of 24, for example, that's 6.
It's a lot, isn't it?
It is a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot of kids.
That's 6 students in a 24-person class in a school, which is completely awful. 1 in 6 are reported experiencing common mental health problems like anxiety or depression any given week in both England and Wales. Touching on these stats and having many people reporting that whatever kind of cause they have, like anxiety, depression, phobia is another one, because a lot of people are scared of some stuff. How do you feel about hearing these stats? There's a question for both of you. How do you feel about these stats being read out or being reported by some of the most leading and reliable websites like Mind, for example?
I think, stats are one thing. It's a way of labelling things, isn't it?
Yeah.
The truth is, I think personally, that we are all unique. We are all individuals, and we all go through things, in life that are very, very different from each other.
Yeah.
Yeah. All that the stats do is sort of put a label on it, bring attention to it, and so they can bring the stats down. But that doesn't make anybody less an individual. Yeah. We look at stats and we look at all these thousands of people, all these millions of people, and we don't look at the stories. We don't see them as individuals. So it's quite easy to dismiss it. And I think bringing it into a college context, I think what we do that is nice, as you mentioned Mind earlier.
Yeah.
We have Mind come into the college campus.
Oh, do you?
When we're not in COVID situation. So once a month we have Jim, who comes in to meet with students once a month to discuss their anxiety. It's mainly anxiety that he deals with. So it's introducing students to external agencies as well that are available when we're not here, like in the holidays and in the evenings and stuff like that.
Would you agree with what Rhian just said, Robert? Like touching on those stats right now, how would you feel about hearing those stats?
With things like, I'll say, I guess, the stats, that's only to it probably a general population or general amount of people. Meanwhile, it's kind of wrong because there's a lot more people than what the stats say.
Yeah.
Like maybe 2-3 times that, just most of the people.
That's only what's declared, isn't it?
Yeah.
So if it's on the statistics, that's only what we can see, isn't it?
It's like, I'll say, I don't mean to make this into a different thing, but because of my autism and Asperger's, a lot of people will turn to me and go, "Oh, you're just having one of your moments, we don't believe you." There'll be a lot of moments like that.
That's always the worst thing.
Yeah.
That's always the worst thing. Apart from research, many media outlets have identified mental health in sort of documentaries. In fact, there was one documentary that came on around BBC around a couple of months back. It was Robert Kemp's Our Silent Emergency. Have you seen that documentary?
I haven't seen that one, but I watched one the other night. It was Ian Wright, the footballer.
Oh yeah, I've seen that one as well. I've seen that one.
Fascinating, yeah.
Basically, I'll run you through the documentary. It's Roman Kemp's mental health. Roman Kemp's a radio presenter on Capital. He's also doing some other media stuff. He's got his own show on the BBC with his dad Martin. There was a documentary about him that was filmed, I think, just as the COVID was easing down, the first one. And it was basically brought around the fact that his friend and producer Joe had committed suicide, and it kind of fell in deep with Roman. He started going through some mental health. He started interviewing some other people who had mental health. This came from England, this came from Northern Ireland, this came from Ireland itself, Wales and Scotland and all that. So I even watched the documentary myself, and I've actually gone through some experience with mental health in my time. I've tried to be someone else rather than just be myself, and that's one of the leading parts of mental health. What makes you comfortable? Because we know the troubles with mental health, that can literally bring us to be in our darkest moments. This is a question for both of you now. Touching on the most comfortable parts, I was a similar again. Touching on the most comfortable parts and the preventable parts, what makes you comfortable? What are the hobbies or activities that you can do that can make you feel comfortable?
It's a really difficult one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because when you struggle with mental health, you feel guilty about everything, don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you don't want to spend any time on yourself because you think, oh, I'm dwelling on it, or and I can't give time to myself because I won't have time for my son then, or I won't have time for my partner or for my parents or whatever. So it's really difficult to sort of change your mindset. And I personally find it very, very, very difficult. So at present, I don't have anything that fills that time because it's full of other things at the moment. But if I did have time, I would work on my artwork. I would go for walks and things like this. But as you say in life, there are moments in life when everything is just overwhelming. You've got too much to deal with. You can't possibly give yourself time. But I think, it's knowing and it's planning for when that passes that you do, give yourself that time. So that's the plan, to get my artwork out.
Would you say the same with you, Robert?
It's a bit of an odd one, I'll say, for me, because I don't like to think ahead into the future, because then that brings me back up to speed with everything and then just makes me feel more sad. So I don't think into the future. I also did kind of a terrible thing during high school where I pretty much made myself forget everything, so I constantly have a clear mind, which is good if you're feeling sad, but when you're trying to do work and stuff, it's kind of terrible. So like a double-edged sword sort of thing. I'll draw if I'm a bit stressed. Often enough, I'll write stories and things, which, such as in college work, the stories and things are pretty much me in some character sense doing whatever, and I'll always bring my ideas off it. But then my number one thing to sort of help with everything is I'll go on my bike out somewhere and cycle, because I'm not like the rest of, I'll say, my generation that stare at their phones for the next 20 minutes. I mean, that's.
I'm guilty of that.
I mean, doing it's like staring at your phone for I don't know how long is not going to help you. I just go on a bike ride, and I may end up crashing into a river. I may end up on the sand.
Wow. Okay. So we've got our first bit of laugh in this very serious topic. Not that that's wrong. But anyway, moving on. Before we end, I asked a few people on a questionnaire for some questions that they want to find out about mental health. Now these are for both of you. Sadly, only 3 questions got sent to me out of 9 because I wasn't too specific with what I asked. So the first question I have is, when did your mental health affect you the most?
Gosh. So you want me to answer that? Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's up to you. It's up to you.
Well, life isn't like this. Yeah, no. It goes up and down and up and down and up and down, and there, numerous things happen throughout life, and sometimes some people experience deep trauma. I lost my brother 5 years ago, which was incredibly traumatic.
Yeah.
And the consequences of that, carry on forever. So I think what I tell students that have been through trauma like that is that it makes you a more of an understanding person. So you're able to empathise more. So even though it's horrendous, catastrophic, and the worst thing that could possibly be imagined, it makes you a better person. Yeah.
Would you say you agree with what Rhian's just said, Rob?
All I can think about when it comes, when it comes to those sort of issues. I'm kind of messed up. All I could think of is the one issue, two, I guess, of depressing or sad things, because my main one that hurt me the most was when I was 10. Oh, wait, no, there's another one. I'm not going into that one now.
Okay, we'll move on.
I'll quickly say. So when I was 10, my dad basically just up and left. No word, no message, no nothing, just up and left. Which about a week later, I found out why, and then I just hated him, and I've hated him since. And it was basically because me and my brother weren't worth enough money, because he only cared for us for the money out of it. And then a couple of weeks ago, my mum was, I'll say, hurting herself, and it wasn't a very nice thing when I heard her tell me that she's supposed to be my carer, and all I've been doing for the past few years is caring for her.
Okay. Here's another question for both of you. How do you feel that the rate of men with mental health and depression, etc., has risen? Rob, I'll start with you.
Oh, I think it's risen quite a lot.
Yeah, because obviously with the COVID...
Oh, yeah, because people are stuck inside, they can't go out. Well, you sort of can, but you really can't. And so if someone's suffering with bad mental health issues, such as self-harm and things, and they used to see some sort of person for therapy every so often, they can't do that because they can't go out anywhere. And then being stuck inside, you're stuck to your own thoughts for even longer, and it just you start going inside your own head, and it's just playing tricks on you. For example, one I've had, because I've not been able to go out and meet friends, is I'll wake up in the morning or in the middle of the night because for some reason my mind is playing a trick on me where it sounds like my mum is screaming my name for help.
Rhian, would you say it's the same with you? Because obviously with the COVID pandemic, as soon as it happened last year, Mind reported that in 2019, 5,000, like over 5,000 people had tragically taken their own lives. You can kind of guarantee that within that year or within the next year or so that amount has been doubled because of the lockdown, because of the pandemic, and people couldn't go out. Mental health causes have risen. Would you say it's the same with you? Like, would you say, like, how do you feel that the rate of men with mental health, like depression, etc., has risen?
I think, well, yeah, inevitably, how many jobs have been lost, how much uncertainty is there, traditionally, men could see themselves as the provider, and if they're not able to provide for their family anymore, how does that affect them, how many of them might have hidden the way they were feeling, and it's been a complete shock to people because they didn't want to, because of stigma, didn't want to ask for help or show that they were struggling. I think it's been really, really tough. It's been tough on everybody in their own unique way. I think men don't talk. They don't talk.
No, they need to talk more, but there's some people that won't talk because of the fear they have of opening up. This final question that's come through. How do you think the pandemic has affected mental health for teenagers? Because obviously the younger generations are reportedly, like, their mental health cases are rising as we speak. How do you feel the pandemic has affected them personally as well?
I think it's been overlooked an awful lot, teenage and sort of young adult mental health throughout this pandemic, and how it's affected them. You're at an age where it's really important that you're becoming more independent, that you're finding out who your mates are, you're finding out the things you enjoy doing, you're like pushing the boundaries a little bit, going to the pub when maybe you're not quite old enough, things like this, and having beach parties and all that, and you've been sort of caged. I can't imagine how that would have been if I, at that age, if I hadn't been able to. I don't know how I would have coped with it, and I think you guys have really been overlooked throughout this completely.
Would you say Rhian's right, Robert, with everything that you said? Because obviously the pandemic's affected teenagers quite personally, but we've just been overlooked. Is what Rhian's trying to say. Would you agree to that?
Yes, I would.
Okay. Simple, straight to the point. Robert, Rhian, thank you guys very much for joining me on this podcast. Thank you very much for watching this podcast. We've talked about mental health quite a bit, and we now know a lot about it. We now learned a lot about it. If you guys want to find out more information about mental health, you can check out these websites right here. But until then, guys, thank you guys for watching, and this has been Fergy Sessions. I've been your host. Goodbye.